Welcome back to my reviews of every single numbered Final Fantasy game. This time, as the title suggests, we're going to be taking a look at Final Fantasy XIII and answer the age-old question, is it really that bad? Well, it's complicated, but first, a little history. We enter into the 7th generation of consoles, and for the first time in a long time, Japanese developers were no longer the go-to developers for RPGs. We see the focus shift to Western developers. Mass Effect, Dragon Age, Fallout 3, Oblivion, all were hugely successful RPG titles, and with Mass Effect 2, Skyrim, and Fallout New Vegas on their way, all eyes were on Square Enix to deliver something big, the next Final Fantasy title. Revealed in 2006, fans eagerly awaited the next numbered entry, though Square was dealing with their own problems in-house. Miscommunication, conflicting ideas on what exactly the combat should play like. This would also be the first multi-platform release for the series, excluding the MMO Final Fantasy XI, which led to difficulty with the game's engine not being super compatible with both consoles. Needless to say, development was very troubled. Regardless, Final Fantasy XIII, for better or for worse, was released on December 17th, 2009, just a month after Dragon Age Origins and 1 month before Mass Effect 2. 13 had a lot to prove, and did it earn its rank amongst the great RPGs of the 7th generation? Well, based on the title of the video, I think we know the answer to that, but regardless, let's find out. Just a quick disclaimer, I am recording on the PC version of the game, which has more than a few issues associated with it. First and most glaringly, the frame rate. You see how choppy this footage is? That isn't OBS or YouTube compression, that's just how the game runs. Pretty choppy at 30 frames. If you do plan on getting the game, go with the PS3 version, as from what I understand, that is the best version of the game, though the Xbox 360 version is just as valuable if you don't care as much about graphical quality. A couple years ago, I think they announced a 13 trilogy re-release on the PS4. I don't know what happened to that because we have still yet to see that, but if that does come out after this video is released and you are watching this after that has come out, then feel free to jump into that version as well, but do so with caution, as I'm sure you'll find as the video progresses. Also, I am spoiling this plot rotten, so if you want to avoid spoilers, jump ahead to the following timestamp to avoid those. With all that said, let us jump in to Final Fantasy XIII. Our journey starts with a train entering a major city. On the train are a handful of prisoners being taken into the city for some sort of relocation. Just as they entered the city, however, two people disguised as prisoners break out and free the prisoners. They shoot up the train for a few minutes before the train is stopped. This is Lightning and Saz. Lightning is more or less our main character, and Saz is, well...
Hey! Wait! No, don't leave me!
Let go!
The hell no! You're my only way out of here!
a lot of fun. Now, exiting the train, the two see that the city has become a war zone. On one side, we have Nora, a group of resistance fighters fighting back against the Sanctum, who are sort of like the government. Now, apparently the army has been taking people and executing them for some sort of purge. The purge is very complicated, and the game never really does a very good job of explaining what exactly it is. They don't do a good job of explaining what anything is, if I'm honest, but I'll try my best to sum it up for you. But again, don't shoot me if I get anything wrong. We have the Sanctum, who are sort of like the upper echelons of the world. As I said, they're sort of like the government. They're in charge of making decisions for Cocoon. We also have the l'Cie, or maybe the fal'Cie, who are basically the Sanctum's lapdogs. They kind of just do what the Sanctum needs them to do, as far as I understand. Now, at some point, something called a pulse fal'Cie was found in a nearby town, Bodum, and people started freaking out. In response, the Sanctum rounded up everyone in that town and began executing them. What the fuck a pulse fal'Cie is and why it caused such a stir that execution was the only solution, I don't know, and the game never really does a good job of explaining why. Lightning is in the city to find her sister Sarah, who apparently is being held by the Sanctum. Saz, who is accompanying her, is also looking for the fal'Cie and decides to travel with Lightning, strength in numbers. Meanwhile, also in the city is Snow, who is a key member of Nora. He is also making his way towards Sarah. It turns out the two are to be married. Along the way, he links up with a few others who are willing to help him push the Sanctum back. It doesn't really go well.
Get him home, please.
Hold on!
Now, the son of this woman is Hope, who after seeing Snow clearly do his best to save his mother, decides to track Snow down and kill him, make him pay. It's never really made clear. However, Hope is attached at the hip with this bubbly girl named Vanille, who seems very unfazed by everything that is happening. The two chase after Snow and end up in the Pulse Vestige where Sarah is being held and the fal'Cie is as well. Lightning and Saz also make it here as well. All paths eventually converge at Sarah, who appears to be on the brink of death. With her last words, she urges Lightning and Snow to save Cocoon. Having fulfilled her purpose as a l'Cie, Sarah crystallizes.
Let's get you out of here.
Hands off. I'm taking her home.
Sis,
I'm not your sister. You couldn't protect her. It's your fault she can save us. Sarah? You can save us. Protect us all. Save Cocoon. Save Cocoon? Sarah, that was your focus?
anything. I'll do anything. Leave it to me, you'll see. I'll protect Cocoon. I'll save everyone.
Somehow, I'll make things right.
You just relax.
Thank you. Sarah!
Sarah! Sarah!
Why is she turning to crystal?
l'Cie who fulfill their focus are transformed into crystal and gain eternal life.
Just like the stories say. So, sweet dreams.
Now, filled with rage, Lightning pushes onward to find the fal'Cie responsible for Sarah's demise. Snow and Saz go with to make sure she gets there safely, with Hope and Vanille tagging along as well. As the five battle against the fal'Cie named Anima, soldiers from the outside attempt to destroy the Pulse Vestige. As our heroes defeat their foe, the Pulse Vestige is destroyed. Though it's not all bad, as the five are saved by some sort of god who turns each of them into a l'Cie and crystallizes the lake beneath them. After each share a strange dream depicting the capital city of Eden being destroyed by an ancient entity known as Ragnarok, the five attempt to find out what to do next. Confident that their mission is to destroy Cocoon, Saz, Hope, Vanille, and Lightning make way to leave the city, while Snow stays behind attempting to dig Sarah out of the rubble of the city. It isn't long until Team Lightning finds a ship that they can use to fly out of the city. Once out of the city, the ship crashes, and Lightning decides to go it alone and separate from the rest. Saz asks Hope to look after Lightning while he and Vanille do something else, I guess. Lightning, now accompanied by Hope, makes way for a town named Palampolum, Jesus Christ, where she hopes to board a train for Eden, which is the seat of the government, where she then hopes to destroy the Sanctum and get her revenge. In layman's terms, she wants to raid the capital. Dear God. Also, Lightning summons a horse. Cool. Meanwhile, Snow, who's still in the city, continues to dig until soldiers approach and try to have him arrested. During the fight, Snow summons these two chicks who can turn into a motorcycle. Neat. A mysterious woman intervenes, however, and captures Snow, taking him and the crystallized Sarah to a separate base. This woman is Fang, who takes Snow to her boss, Sid Raines, who orders Snow to assist him in finding our other heroes in the hopes of ending the Fal'Cie rule over Cocoon. I should point out, by the way, that we are 9 hours into this game, which brings me to my first major problem. The game has terrible pacing issues. For a little bit of perspective, by the 9-hour mark in Mass Effect 2, the player is starting to finish up their last couple of loyalty missions and make way for the Reaper IFF. Now, on paper, you look at that and you say, well, then Final Fantasy XIII has more value for your money, right? It's a longer story. But in reality, all that means is that a story that could have been told in 15 hours is stretched out to 50. Anyways, jumping back into things with Team Lightning, Hope reveals to Lightning that he blames Snow for his mother's death, admitting that he only really accompanied Lightning because he wanted to get strong enough to challenge Snow. Hope then forms Operation Nora and swears to get revenge on both Snow and the Sanctum, Nora being the name of his mother. Lightning attempts to convince Hope that Snow is blameless, but Hope doesn't seem to want to listen. Now, with a slightly uneasy relationship, the two continue towards Palampolum. Having arrived in Palampolum, Lightning suddenly has an epiphany that perhaps she has been avoiding the real problem, and realizes that she is now dragging Hope through the mud as well. Lightning promises to stay with Hope, but urges him to meet with his father while they are in Palampolum. Soon, the two are surrounded by soldiers. Things look bleak until Snow and Fang arrive in the nick of time to save them. In the ensuing chaos, Lightning and Fang are separated from Hope and Snow, and the four attempt to reconvene with one another, with Lightning especially worried about leaving Hope and Snow alone together. Also, apparently, Fang and Vanille know each other. Apparently, they are both from Grand Pulse, an area separate from the Sanctum. At some point in the past, they fulfilled their focus and turned to Crystal. Apparently, they woke from their stasis just a few days ago in Bodum. She and Vanille turned this young boy into a l'Cie as well. Lightning, having learned that Sarah will now wake from her crystal stasis, decides to continue onward with Fang to find Snow and Hope. Speaking of, they're doing about as well as expected.
Nora Eston. She was my mother. And she died because of you!
You're the one she meant!
After all that, Snow apologizes for Nora's death, and the two seem to make amends, choosing to move on with renewed strength and respect for each other. It's short-lived, however, when the two are attacked. Coming in the nick of time to save them are Fang and Lightning. With Snow too injured to fight, the three deal with the enemy and continue onward to Hope's house. The four make it there safely, and Hope and his father make amends, while Lightning and Snow share a quiet moment together. Now, this scene is great. It's rather surface level, and these revelations have already been made by each other individually, but at least it's something, and that's really what crushes this game's story for me. Not the confusion and not the new vocabulary the game just throws at the player, but rather the characters. There are so few moments for the characters, and by extension the player, to just talk and get to know each other. Anyways, this moment of respite is cut short when Psycom attacks. After a brief battle, Hope says goodbye to his father, and the four retreat with the help of Cid's soldiers. While all of this is happening, Team Saz, remember them, are making their way towards Nautilus, the City of Dreams. Along the way, Saz reveals to Vanille that he in fact has a son. That little boy Fang and Vanille turned into Lassie, well, that's actually Saz's son, Daj. Saz hypothesized that his son's focus was to destroy Anima, which is why he boarded the train with Lightning in the first place. Vanille chooses to keep her involvement with Daj a secret, and after a short boat ride, the two end up in Nautilus. While there, Saz decides to turn himself in the hopes that his captors will grant him the opportunity to see Daj one last time. Almost as if it was destined, Daj soon shows up with a platoon of PSICOM soldiers at his side. Daj turns to Crystal, having fulfilled his focus of capturing Pulse Lassie. And the soldiers take this opportunity to reveal to Saz that Daj is only a Lassie because of Vanille. After a brief argument, Saz resolves not to get revenge on Vanille, but rather take his own life. But he can't do it. During this moment of weakness between the two, the PSICOM soldiers take them into custody. It isn't long until Team Lightning learns of Saz and Vanille's capture, and the four make to rescue them. But it's for naught, as Vanille and Saz quite easily escape on their own. Before long, the six reunite and face off against the Primarch. What happens next? I don't know. I stopped playing the game. Does it feel like I just wasted your goddamn time? Good, because that's how I felt during my entire playtime. The biggest problem here is characters. I don't care about any of them, with maybe two exceptions, Saz and Vanille. They're the only two characters that get anything to work with. With their side story, it feels mostly superfluous and could probably be taken out of the game entirely, but at least it was something. It was personal for both of the characters involved. Compare that to the conflict between Snow and Hope, and Saz and Vanille's story is leagues ahead. With Snow and Hope, that relationship is very one-sided, as is the mentor relationship between Hope and Lightning. For a bit of perspective, let me show you this scene. For a little bit of context, this is the first time all six characters have seen each other in a couple of weeks.
Vanille!
Fang!
See how shallow it is? It's very professional. Vanille and Fang get a personal reunion, but it just feels so one note and very formal with the others. Now granted, the characters don't actually know each other all that well, even at this point, Saz and Vanille excluded, but still, anything would be better. While Fang and Vanille reunite, maybe have Saz go up and ask Lightning why she came back for them, and Lightning can respond by saying that Hope helped convince her that they're all friends with each other, and friends help each other out. That example has been done a million times, but I would have accepted it here because there was so little else to work with these characters. The only other character I kind of liked, other than Saz and Vanille, was Snow, but it was less because of Snow himself and more so because of the voice talent behind him. Seriously, you'd be amazed how far a good performance can carry an otherwise forgettable character. I'm sorry guys, I really don't like leaving a game unfinished, but at this point I was 21 hours in and the game had yet to do anything for me, and with only a handful of chapters left, it didn't look like it was ever going to. I didn't care at all about the characters and I cared less about what they were doing. It's a shame too, because there are some really good moments in this game. I particularly liked any time the game would flash back to Snow and Sarah. The two have really good chemistry between one another, and for what it's worth, it almost made me believe that I was playing a better game. It also doesn't help that the voice talent for Snow and Sarah is the best in the game. There is, other smaller stuff that crops up from time to time. Take this moment from the same scene where the six reunite. See? That's fun. More of that, small character stuff like that makes the player at the very least like the characters. It's rarely here, and when it is, it's so brief it's forgotten soon after. Unfortunately, the gameplay is equally as poor as the story. You remember earlier when I said that recommending this game was complicated? Well,
it's fiction. We made it up. We made this one up. It's a made-up tale. It's a total fabrication.
but I'm getting ahead of myself, so let's go over the basics first. The game is still turn-based, though it seems to be hidden a little better. Here, we're in the Active Time Battle, or ATB system. Basically, once the bar is filled, the character will carry out whatever actions you've assigned to them. I like this system. It kind of forces the player to be a little more engaged and aware of how the fight is going. It's cool, and it means that the player is constantly doing something during the battle, either planning or executing attacks. However, all that shit doesn't really matter, it's just window dressing. The game, unfortunately, still boils down to mash X to win, most of the time. Final Fantasy XIII introduces an auto battle system. Simply press the button and the game will give you what actions are most optimal to perform in a given situation. The game, quite literally, plays itself. Now, I know what the comments are gonna say. You can just turn it off. No. If the devs didn't want people to use the mechanic, they wouldn't have put it in the game. So I'm gonna talk about it. The game also introduces a stagger meter in the top right of the screen. Do enough damage during the battle and the enemy will stagger. During this time, your attack damage is multiplied, and the more you hit during this brief period of time, the more the multiplier increases, meaning the more you hit, the more damage you're doing, more multiplier increases, the more damage you're doing on top of that. Be careful when filling the meter though, because magic will fill the meter more but cause it to decrease quicker, while physical attacks fill the meter less, but the meter decreases much slower. Again, on paper, I like this idea. In practice, most of the early games, since you're primarily in pairs rather than groups of 3, the meter is rarely used. It's just smarter to have one party member heal while the other damages. Sure, maybe the fights take longer, but it's generally safer. Once you're back to parties of 3, the stagger meter becomes more or less required for certain enemies. I mean, seriously, look at how long it takes to beat this one guy without the stagger meter. This isn't a boss, by the way, this is just a regular enemy on the field. Without filling that stagger meter, you're going to be there for a little while. Finally, the last thing added to this game are paradigms. Each party member has 3 of a possible 6 classes. 2 assault classes, Commando and Ravager, and 4 support classes, Sentinel, Synergist, Medic, and Saboteur. See the problem already? Now, paradigms are basically different builds for your party. You can switch between these paradigms on the fly. They basically switch what class each party member is using in a given time. If you notice your party is taking a lot of damage, well, switch to a more defensive paradigm and have Vanille heal Snow as he takes all the powerful attacks, while Lightning deals piecemeal damage. Once again, on paper, I like this idea. In execution, however, it's just not very good. Again, like I said earlier, it's just easier to sit on a defensive paradigm and have one person damage while the other heals. Again, it takes longer, but it's usually just safer. Also, the game kind of encourages this behavior. With 4 support classes and only 2 assault classes, the game is just balanced for a more defensive playstyle. I feel like the stagger meter was added last minute to try to incentivize the player to be a little more aggressive, but it just doesn't really pan out. It's simply easier and usually more effective to just play defensive. Also, not helping this is the game's difficulty. It's just too easy. The enemies cannot handle the player. The player is always ridiculously powerful, and in most scenarios, the enemy cannot outdamage the healing you get from your support characters. So in most cases, it just ends up being killing time until you get to the next cutscene, which, since we've established that the story is nothing to write home about, there's really no reason for it to exist at all. This could just be a movie and nothing would change. Now again, building on top of that, it's very possible to avoid a lot of combat encounters. This is sort of a double-edged sword here. On one end, there are no random encounters. All of the enemies are on the field in a given area, and the player initiates battle by either running into them or them running into you. It's entirely possible to just avoid fighting if you want to. The enemy gives up pursuit after a few moments, and you can just press onward. This is pretty great, as it allows the player to engage in battles they want. If you see a group of enemies you don't want to bother with, just run past them. Great. But if you choose not to engage an enemy, you'll end up hurting real bad when it comes to the boss battles. Switching focuses slightly, leveling up is linear. Again, kind of. As I said earlier, each party member has 3 classes that they can use, and the player can choose which of these classes they want to level up and when. You see, each battle you gain points that you can then spend on upgrades for your classes. Most of them just boil down to simple stat increases with the odd ability thrown in here and there. Again, you can choose which class to upgrade, but the upgrade tree for each is linear. Branching paths for additional buffs here and there, but you'd be a fool not to get those. Because the boss battles suck dick. Pardon my language, but they are terrible. Remember in my Final Fantasy I video where I complained about Chaos being a bullet sponge? Well, that's every boss in Final Fantasy XIII, with the exceptions being the summons. Those force you to try different strategies, but the regular end chapter bosses are hell on earth to fight. Ridiculous stats and attacks that can down your entire party very quickly if you're not careful. Oh wait, careful? Sorry, wrong word. I meant to say if your numbers aren't high enough. It doesn't matter how prepared you are, what strategy you try, it won't matter. Your only option is to load a previous save and defeat every single opponent you left behind in order to get more points so that you can then level your classes just so you have a chance at beating the boss. I hate this type of game design. If I lose a fight, it should be because I was too confident, or the strategy I used wasn't working. But more often than not, in this game, it's just because my numbers aren't high enough. Again, exception being the summon fights. I only did 3. If there's more, great, I don't care. These are really excellent. They force you to do different strategies because each summon responds differently to different tactics. That's cool. Sure, this fight with Brynhildr got my blood boiling, but I felt good when I finally beat it. Not so with the other fights. I was exhausted when I beat these. Going back to my point on linearity, how do you guys feel about hallways? Now, let me take you back to the first couple hours with the game. I bought it, booted it up, played an hour, ended the recording, and realized I still had another hour left of free time before I had to move on with the day. Okay, I'll record another hour. So I played another hour, and when it ended, I said to myself, damn, am I still on the tutorial? I don't think I was alone in thinking that. Normally, games like this drop you into a small area in order for you to get the hang of the game before really opening up and allowing the player to go crazy with the mechanics that at this point they should know pretty well. Think Breath of the Wild or Red Dead Redemption 2. That's not the case with this game. The entire game is just one corridor after the next. Now, you don't misunderstand. Linear games are not inherently bad. Last of Us 1 and 2, Mirror's Edge, Halo 3, The Force Unleashed, all are video games I love. They are also very linear. Sure, those games have moments where they open up, much like Final Fantasy XIII does, but the way to progress is usually restricted. An RPG does not seem very conducive to linearity. I feel like Final Fantasy XIII is trying to have its cake and eat it too. By making the game more linear, they can control their pacing more effectively, making for an extremely consistent experience. Think Mirror's Edge. But they also want to appease the RPG fans, so they littered 100 battles throughout the area, which screeches any pacing the game has to a halt. If there's one thing I can praise this game for, is its presentation. Yes, the PC port is far from polished with the choppy frame rate and frame drops when things get visually intense. This is all well documented and I can't really add anything to that. Visually, for 2009, the game looks incredible. Keep in mind that my favorite game from 2009, Halo ODST, had character models that looked like... Well, but Final Fantasy XIII looks incredible. I still think the characters look great to this day. Fingers can look a little blocky, but that's not a huge deal. The character design themselves are a different story. I don't hate all of them. I like the design for Saz, Lightning, Fang, and Vanille. But that's really it. Side characters look like whatever. Hope looks like a Kingdom Hearts character that Nomura didn't end up using. And Snow... I mean, come on. What's going on here? He's trying a little too hard to be cool. The music is once again excellent. I have very few complaints there. Standouts for me are Saz's theme, and the battle theme. It's all good stuff, except for Snow's theme. I mean, what the fuck? Go listen to it. It's really not very good. The pre-rendered cutscenes are beautiful, even though the game spoils most of them in the intro cinematic. Regardless, it's good stuff. Unfortunately, the voice work is just fine at best. For the record, I don't blame any of the actors themselves. When voice talent is poor, it's very rarely the performer's fault. So don't walk away with the wrong message here. Just about every voice actor has been in another role that I loved them in, but for some reason they don't really work for me in this game. The standouts here are obviously Troy Baker as Snow and Laura Bailey as Sarah. I mentioned them earlier, but that's not really surprising if you know their line of work. Final Fantasy XIII is a sad one. If it wasn't obvious by the title, I really wanted to be the one to stand on top of a mountain and scream the game's praises, but I just can't. I find more often than not the consensus on a game, particularly one like Final Fantasy XIII, to be very exaggerated and over the top, but in this case, I have to agree. The game is just not fun. It's the first game I played in a long time that I didn't finish, not counting Final Fantasy XV, which I would later return to and complete. I really wanted to like this game, but I just can't. The unengaging story combined with the less than stellar combat system make for a game that is the opposite of fun. It's a chore to play. Final Fantasy XIII is going to be placed in the F tier. I cannot for the life of me understand why Square thought this game deserved 2 sequels. Alright, well, let's consult the wheel to see which Final Fantasy game is next. Despite my feelings on the first game and 13, I'm not going to let that impact the next game. I'm going in with an open mind. Though, Final Fantasy is off to a really bad start with me. Oh, Final Fantasy III. I've heard good things about this one. I'll be going with the PC version of this game, so expect that video to be out soon. Anyways, thank you guys for watching, and take care.